Close your eyes for a moment and imagine standing in a torch-lit tent where the air shimmers with heat and sacred smoke. A woman with eyes like ancient amber takes your trembling hand, draws a single drop of blood, and in that crimson bead she sees everything, your crowns and your shrouds, your triumphs and the tears that will drown you. She speaks words that brand themselves into your soul, words you will carry like chains for the rest of your days, wondering with each passing year which moment will be the one she foretold. This is the terrible gift and curse of prophecy in Westeros. Welcome back, dear travelers. Tonight we venture into territory more ethereal than any we have explored before. A realm where past and future blur together, where dreams carry more weight than steel, and where a single vision can reshape the destiny of nations. In our world, dreams are often dismissed as the mind's way of processing the day's events. Random firings of neurons creating nonsense, narratives that evaporate with morning light. But in Westeros and the lands beyond, dreams are something altogether different. They are windows into what was, what is, and most terrifyingly, what will be. They are messages from gods both old and new, warnings from forces beyond mortal comprehension, glimpses of futures that may be inevitable, or perhaps, just perhaps, that can still be changed. The people of this world understand that prophecy is real in a way we can scarcely imagine. They have seen it proven time and again throughout their history. A girl dreams of a city consumed by fire 14 flames, and her family flees just before the entire civilization collapses into the sea. A young man sees himself as a great warrior in his sleep and wakes to reshape the world through conquest. An ancient woman stares into flames and sees armies of the dead marching south, and her words send ripples across continents. Yet prophecy in Westeros is never simple, never straightforward. It arrives wrapped in symbols and metaphors, in images that seem clear until you try to grasp their meaning. A blue flower growing from a crack in a wall of ice could mean a dozen different things depending on who interprets it. 3 heads of a dragon might be literal or might represent something else entirely. Smoke and salt could describe a volcanic island or a dozen other locations across the known world. This ambiguity is perhaps the cruelest aspect of prophetic knowledge. To know that something will happen but not understand when or how or what it truly means creates a special kind of torment. It drives people to obsession, to madness, to desperate actions that sometimes bring about the very futures they sought to avoid. King Aerys II became increasingly paranoid about prophecies, seeing threats in every shadow until his fear consumed him and helped bring about the rebellion that ended his reign. Prince Rhaegar abandoned his wife and duties because he believed prophecy demanded it, setting in motion events that would destroy his entire family. The maesters of the Citadel, those learned men who serve as healers and advisors throughout Westeros, are deeply skeptical of prophecy. They see it as superstition, tricks of memory where people remember the predictions that came true and forget the hundreds that did not. Archmaester Marwyn is something of an exception, but most of his colleagues dismiss prophecy as they dismiss magic itself, as relics of a more primitive time that have no place in an enlightened world. They point out that prophecies are always vague enough to be interpreted multiple ways, that they never give useful specific information like dates or names, that they could simply be lucky guesses or deliberate frauds. And yet, even the most skeptical maester must admit that some predictions have proven eerily accurate. How else to explain Daenerys Targaryen's dream that saved her family from the doom? How to account for the specific details that seers have revealed about events they could not possibly have known. The maesters might prefer a world of pure reason, but the world itself refuses to cooperate with that preference. What makes prophecy particularly dangerous is that it can become a self-fulfilling mechanism. When Cersei Lannister learns as a child that she will be cast down by a younger, more beautiful queen, that knowledge shapes every decision she makes regarding other women who might threaten her position. Her actions against Marjorie Tyrell and her paranoia about Daenerys Targaryen are directly motivated by trying to prevent the prophecy. Yet in fighting against it, she may well bring it about. If she had never heard those words, would she have acted differently? Would the outcome have changed? This is the paradox at the heart of prophetic knowledge. If you know the future, can you change it? Or does your knowledge of it become part of the chain of events that makes it happen? The philosopher might say that true prophecy must describe an unchangeable future. Otherwise, it is not prophecy, but merely a possible outcome. But the lived experience of those who receive visions suggests something more complex, a future that is fixed in some ways and fluid in others, where certain key events are destined, but the paths to them remain malleable. There is also the question of whose interest prophecy serves. Melisandre sees visions in her flames that she interprets as showing Stannis Baratheon as the savior of the world. Yet she admits her visions are sometimes difficult to read, that she sees shadows and must divine their meaning. Is she truly seeing the future, or seeing what she wishes to see? Are the visions themselves objective, or do they reflect the desires and expectations of the seer? When the undying of Qarth showed Daenerys visions, are they revealing truth or attempting to manipulate her for their own purposes? Magic in this world, and prophecy is certainly a form of magic, always comes with a price. Sometimes that price is obvious, blood spilled or life force drained. Other times it is more subtle, a corruption of the soul, an obsession that consumes all other concerns, a burden of knowledge that weighs heavier with each passing day. Those who see the future often seem to wish they could unsee it, to return to a state of blessed ignorance where the present moment is all that matters. The children of the forest, those ancient beings who predated humanity in Westeros, understood prophecy in ways that have been largely lost. Their green seers could see not just forward, but backward through time, accessing memories preserved in the weirwood trees, experiencing events from thousands of years ago as clearly as if they were happening in the present moment. This suggests that time itself may work differently than we understand, that past, present, and future might all exist simultaneously in some eternal now that certain gifted individuals can access. Yet even with all this power, even with the ability to see what was and what will be, the children of the forest could not prevent their own decline. They saw the coming of the first men and fought a war lasting 2,000 years. They created the White Walkers as a weapon against humanity, only to lose control of their creation. They witnessed the Andals arrive with their iron and their new gods, watched as the weirwoods were cut down and their sacred places desecrated. If they could see the future, why could they not change it? Or did they see it and simply accept it as inevitable? These are the questions that haunt anyone who thinks deeply about the nature of prophecy in this world. Is the future written in stone, unchangeable no matter what actions we take? Or do prophecies show us possibilities, warnings of what might be if we do not alter our course? The answer seems to depend on which type of vision we are discussing, for there are many different forms of prophetic sight in Westeros, each with its own rules and limitations. Among the most powerful of these are the visions that belong to a bloodline forged in dragonfire and ancient Valyrian magic. The Targaryens, that storied family of dragon lords who conquered Westeros and ruled it for nearly 3 centuries, possessed a gift that set them apart even from other Valyrian families. Certain members of their bloodline, seemingly at random, would experience what they called dragon dreams, visions so vivid and portentous that they could reshape the course of history. These were not the confused, fragmentary images of normal sleep, but crystal clear glimpses of events yet to come, often accompanied by a certainty that what was seen would inevitably occur. The most famous dragon dream in all of history belonged to a young woman named Daenerys Targaryen, who lived in the Valyrian freehold at the height of its power, when dragons numbered in the hundreds, and the greatest empire the world had ever known seemed eternal and unshakable. Daenerys was the maiden daughter of Lord Aenar Targaryen, a relatively minor dragon lord whose family holdings were not among the most prestigious in Valyria. But 12 years before the doom, Daenerys woke screaming from a dream so terrible, so undeniably true, that it changed everything. She had seen the end of Valyria. In her dream, the 14 flames that powered the Freehold's dragons and gave it magical might erupted all at once in a cataclysm beyond imagination. The ground split open and swallowed entire cities. Tsunamis hundreds of feet high swept across the peninsula. Dragons fell burning from smoke-choked skies. And every dragon lord, every great house, every soul in that mighty civilization died screaming or was simply obliterated in an instant, leaving only ruins that would be too deadly for anyone to explore for hundreds of years afterward. When Daenerys shared her dream, most dismissed it. The doom of Valyria was unthinkable. The civilization had stood for 5,000 years. The dragon lords had conquered half the known world. They possessed magic and knowledge beyond anything that had come before. How could such power simply end? Surely the dream was just a nightmare, the product of a young woman's fears, rather than any real vision of the future. But Aenar Targaryen believed his daughter. Perhaps he had his own reasons to suspect something was wrong. Whispers about the ground trembling more frequently, about the smell of sulfur growing stronger in the air. Perhaps he simply trusted his child's gift. Whatever his motivation, he did something that must have seemed insane to his peers. He sold everything, packed up his family, his dragons, his slaves and treasures, and sailed away from Valyria to the westernmost outpost of the Freehold's influence, a dreary volcanic island called Dragonstone. His fellow dragon lords mocked him. They called him a coward and a fool, said he was abandoning civilization for some barbarian rock in the middle of nowhere based on the fevered imaginings of a girl. Aenar's family went from being minor nobility in the greatest empire on earth to being isolated strangers on a cold, unwelcoming island with only a few other Valyrian families for company. It must have seemed like he had thrown away everything his ancestors had built. Then, exactly as Daenerys had dreamed, the doom came. In a single day and night of fire and fury, the entire Valyrian peninsula was destroyed. The 14 flames erupted simultaneously. Earthquakes shattered the land. The sea itself seemed to boil. When the ash and smoke finally cleared enough to see, Valyria was gone, replaced by a smoking ruin of broken islands and poisoned waters that would later be called the Smoking Sea. Every dragon lord except the Targaryens perished. Hundreds of dragons died. 5,000 years of history and culture and accumulated knowledge vanished as if it had never been. And Aenar Targaryen's family, alone of all the 40 dragon lord houses, survived because they had listened to a dream. This single fact established the Targaryens' belief in dragon dreams as more than superstition. The dreams had saved them. The dreams were real. And from that point forward, when a Targaryen had a dragon dream, people paid attention. The dreams did not come to every Targaryen, which made them all the more precious and mysterious when they did appear. Some members of the family would live their entire lives without experiencing a single prophetic vision. Others would have many dreams throughout their years. The gift seemed to run stronger in some generations than others, and there was no obvious pattern to predict who would have the sight and who would not. During the reign of King Mekar I, several of his sons claimed to experience dragon dreams. Prince Daeron consistently dreamed of events that came to pass, and spoke of these dreams with confidence. He saw his own death in a trial by combat, and accepted it with calm resignation, knowing the outcome was fixed. His brother Aerion also claimed dreams, though whether his visions were genuine or symptoms of his growing madness remained unclear. Even young Prince Aegon, who would later become King Aegon V, may have possessed some measure of the gift. But perhaps the most consequential dragon dream of the later Targaryen dynasty belonged to Prince Rhaegar, the eldest son of Mad King Aerys and heir to the Iron Throne. Rhaegar was a man obsessed with prophecy, spending hours reading ancient texts and consulting with learned men about hidden meanings in old songs and legends. He became convinced that a great threat was coming from the far north, that an age of darkness and ice would descend upon the world, and that only a special individual, a prophesied hero, could stand against it. Rhaegar apparently experienced dreams or visions that convinced him he had a crucial role to play in this prophecy. For a time, he believed he himself was the promised hero, born amid smoke and salt at Summerhall, where his birth coincided with a great tragedy. He trained obsessively with weapons despite having been a bookish child, transforming himself into one of the realm's finest warriors. He sought to fulfill what he saw as his destiny. But then his understanding shifted. Rhaegar came to believe that the prophecy did not refer to him but to his children, or specifically to a son who would be the prophesied prince. When his first two children were born, a daughter named Rhaenys and a son named Aegon, he spoke of his son as if the boy's destiny was already written. At one point, Rhaegar was heard saying that the prince that was promised would come from his line, that the dragon must have 3 heads, speaking in the cryptic language of prophecy that would mean nothing to most listeners, but carried deep significance to those who understood the old Valyrian lore. This obsession with prophecy directly led to the events that destroyed the Targaryen dynasty. Rhaegar became convinced he needed a 3rd child to fulfill the prophecy's requirements. But his wife Elia Martell nearly died giving birth to Aegon, and the maesters said she could not safely bear more children. This knowledge apparently drove Rhaegar to his fateful decision to annul his marriage and wed Lyanna Stark in secret, a union that would produce a child, but at the cost of igniting Robert's rebellion, plunging the realm into war, and ultimately causing Rhaegar's own death and the deaths of his first 2 children. Did the prophecies doom Rhaegar, or did his interpretation of them doom him? This question haunts the Targaryen legacy. If he had never believed in the dragon dreams, never tried to engineer the birth of a prophesied savior, would things have turned out differently? Or was it all inevitable, each piece falling into place exactly as it had to, with Rhaegar's obsession simply being part of the mechanism that brought about what was meant to be? The most detailed account we have of dragon dreams and Targaryen visions comes from Daenerys Targaryen's experience in the House of the Undying in Karth. When her dragons were stolen, Daenerys followed them to that ancient, mysterious structure where the warlocks of Karth dwell in a state between life and death, sustained by magical substances and existing outside normal time. What she experienced within those walls was part vision, part illusion, part journey through possible futures, and past events that shaped her understanding of her own destiny. Daenerys walked through rooms that could not exist, saw things that had not yet happened, and things that had happened years before her birth. She witnessed her brother Viserys dying again, molten gold pouring over his head as he screamed. She saw a tall lord with copper skin and silver gold hair, beneath a banner showing a fiery stallion, a burning city behind him, an image that might represent Rhaego, the son she lost, conquering in some timeline that never came to be. She watched a prince die with rubies flying from his chest as he whispered a woman's name with his last breath. This was clearly her brother Rhaegar falling at the Trident, struck down by Robert Baratheon's warhammer, dying as he gasped out the name of the woman whose love had cost him everything. The vision allowed Daenerys to witness a pivotal moment she had never actually seen, understanding in a visceral way the price her family had paid for decisions made before she was born. Other visions proved more cryptic and troubling. A blue-eyed king who cast no shadow raised a red sword in his hand, an image that might represent Stannis Baratheon, with his supposedly magical blade Lightbringer, but without the substance that should accompany a true hero, casting no shadow suggesting something fundamentally absent or false. A cloth dragon swayed on poles amidst a cheering crowd, perhaps showing a false Targaryen or a pretender being elevated by the masses, a warning about trusting appearances. Most ominous of all, Daenerys saw a great stone beast taking wing from a smoking tower, breathing shadows. This vision has never been adequately explained. Could it represent a dragon turned to stone that would somehow live again? Could it be metaphorical, showing how even things that seem impossibly dead and petrified can rise up once more? Or does it refer to something that has not yet occurred, a future event waiting to unfold in ways we cannot predict? She saw her childhood home with the red door in Braavos, the house with the lemon tree where she experienced the only happiness of her early years. This seemingly simple image carried deep emotional weight, representing safety and innocence that could never be reclaimed. She walked through halls where dragon skulls hung on walls, visiting a past she never knew directly, but that lived in her blood and bones. And then came perhaps the most significant vision of all. Daenerys found herself in a room where a woman who appeared to be her sister-in-law Aelia Martell held a newborn baby. Her brother Rhaegar stood nearby, and when asked if he would make a song for the child, he replied that the boy already had a song, that he was the prince that was promised, and his was the song of ice and fire. This vision connected multiple prophecies together, suggesting that the prince who would save the world from darkness and Azor Ahai reborn might be the same figure, and that this figure would unite the ice of the north with the fire of the dragons. The Undying also showed Daenerys a vision of herself walking through a throne room covered in snow. The roof was destroyed, ash or snow falling from the broken ceiling onto the iron throne itself. She walked toward the throne, reached out to touch it, but then heard her dragons crying and turned away to find them beyond the wall, in a tent where her dead husband Drogo and the son she lost waited for her. She chose her dragons over the throne, chose the love she had known and lost over power. Years later, this vision would prove eerily prophetic when Daenerys ultimately did walk through a snow-covered, destroyed throne room in King's Landing after burning the city. She got to the throne she had dreamed of claiming her entire life, but by then so much had changed, so many lines had been crossed, that touching it meant nothing. The vision had shown her this moment, shown her that the throne she sought would ultimately be ashes and disappointment. But she had not understood the warning until it was too late. The dragon dreams of the Targaryens demonstrate how prophecy works in this world, showing truth but not explaining it, revealing futures but not the paths to them. The dreams saved the Targaryens from the doom, but could not prevent their eventual fall from power in Westeros. They showed Rhaegar what must happen, but not how to bring it about without destroying everything he loved. They gave Daenerys glimpses of her future that might have warned her away from her darkest impulses if she had interpreted them correctly. But the language of symbol and metaphor obscured their meaning until events had already unfolded. Yet even as the Targaryens received visions wrapped in dragon dreams and symbols unique to their bloodline, another prophecy echoed across the world, spoken in different tongues, but telling fundamentally the same story. Of all the prophecies that haunt the world of ice and fire, none carries more weight or has inspired more fervent belief than the ancient prediction of a hero who will save the world from an age of darkness. This prophecy appears in different forms across various cultures, suggesting it may refer to a real future event that was somehow seen or understood by people separated by vast distances and different traditions. In Westeros, this figure is called the prince that was promised. In the Far East, in ancient Asshai where magic still flows strong, the same hero is known as Azor Ahai, a legendary warrior from the dawn of history who supposedly will be reborn when the world needs him most. The legend of Azor Ahai dates back 8,000 years or more, to the time called the Long Night, when darkness fell across the world. Every culture has stories of this era, a winter that lasted a generation, a night that seemed it would never end, when strange creatures of ice and death emerged from the frozen north to prey on the living. Humanity faced extinction, cowering in whatever sheltered spaces they could find, watching as the dead themselves rose to fight against the living. In this darkest hour, according to the text preserved in Asshai, a hero arose named Azor Ahai. He was chosen by the Lord of Light, the red god Ahlor, to stand against the darkness and push it back. But to fulfill this role, he needed a weapon unlike any other, a sword that would burn with holy fire and cut through the night itself. This sword would come to be known as Lightbringer, and its forging would require a terrible sacrifice. The story goes that Azor Ahai labored for 30 days and 30 nights to create his sword. When he was done, he tempered it in water, but the blade shattered. He tried again, working for 50 days and 50 nights, and this time he tempered the blade by plunging it into the heart of a lion, but again the sword broke. Finally, he worked for 100 days and 100 nights, creating the finest blade he had ever made. But he knew that water and lion's blood were not enough. To truly make the sword magical, to give it the power to defeat darkness itself, he would need to temper it in the ultimate sacrifice. Azor Ahai called his beloved wife, Nissa, to his side. She must have known what he intended, must have seen it in his eyes, but legend says she bared her breast for the blade without hesitation. When Azor Ahai drove the sword into her heart, crying as he killed the woman he loved most, Her soul and her strength and her courage all went into the steel. The calm sword became Lightbringer, burning with heat and radiance, and with this weapon, Azor Ahai drove back the darkness, ending the long night and saving humanity from extinction. This story is repeated across different cultures with variations. In some versions, Azor Ahai is called by different names. Hirkun the hero in one place, Yin-Tar in another, Neferion elsewhere, Eldrick Shadow Chaser in Westeros itself. But the core elements remain the same: a great warrior, a burning sword, a sacrifice of love, and a victory over the darkness that threatens to consume all life. The consistency of the story across such diverse peoples suggests it may have some basis in actual events, that something like this really did happen in the distant past. But the story does not end with Azor Ahai's victory in ancient times. The prophecy preserved in Ashai claims that he will return, that after a long summer, when the stars bleed and the cold breath of darkness falls heavy on the world again, Azor Ahai will be reborn. In this dread hour, a warrior will draw from the fire a burning sword, and that sword will be Lightbringer, and the one who clasps it will be Azor Ahai come again, and the darkness will flee before them. The prophecy provides certain signs by which the reborn hero can be recognized. They will be born amid salt and smoke, beneath a bleeding star. They will wake dragons out of stone, bringing to life creatures that have been dead or dormant. They will forge Lightbringer anew, pulling a burning blade from flames, and with this weapon they will stand against the darkness when it returns. These signs seem specific, but like all prophecy, they can be interpreted in multiple ways. What does it mean to be born amid salt and smoke? This could describe a location near the sea and volcanic activity, like Dragonstone, the ancient Targaryen stronghold that sits on a volcanic island, where the air smells of sulfur and the waves crash against black rock. But salt could also mean tears, the salt water of grief, and smoke could mean fire from any source. The phrase is evocative, but vague enough to apply to multiple situations. Waking dragons from stone is equally ambiguous. Literally, it might mean bringing fossilized dragon eggs back to life, something that Daenerys Targaryen accomplished when she walked into Khal Drogo's funeral pyre with 3 ancient eggs and emerged with 3 living hatchlings. But it could also be metaphorical. Dragons representing power or magic, or the Targaryen bloodline itself, and stone representing death or dormancy. Could waking dragons from stone simply mean restoring House Targaryen to power after they were overthrown? Or could it refer to something else entirely? The bleeding star proved to be more concrete when a great red comet appeared in the sky shortly after Daenerys hatched her dragons. The comet blazed across the heavens for months, visible from every part of the world, and in Westeros it became known as King Joffrey's Comet or the Red Messenger, depending on who was speaking. But in the Far East, Red priests of Ahlor proclaimed it as the bleeding star from the prophecy, a herald of Azor Ahai's return. The timing certainly seemed significant, appearing just as dragons returned to the world for the first time in over a century. An important detail about the prophecy that is often overlooked is that the original text was written in High Valyrian, a language where many words have no gender, or where gender is different from how we understand it in common tongue. The word that is translated as prince actually has no specific gender, meaning it could just as easily refer to a princess. This realization came to Maester Aemon late in his life. after decades of believing the prophecy must refer to a male hero. When he finally understood that the translation had been wrong all along, that the promised savior could be male or female, his entire interpretation of the prophecy shifted. Aemon had spent years believing that Prince Rhaegar was the fulfillment of the prophecy. Rhaegar was born at Summerhall during a great tragedy, a fire that killed many people, which could satisfy the smoke requirement. Rhaegar believed in the prophecy and tried to shape his life to fulfill it. But when Rhaegar died at the Trident, Aemon knew the prophecy must refer to someone else. Late in life, when Aemon heard stories of Daenerys Targaryen in the far east, a young woman who had hatched 3 dragon eggs and was rallying followers to her banner, who had been literally born on Dragonstone, he became convinced she was the prince that was promised. She was born amid salt and smoke, on a volcanic island during a terrible storm. She woke dragons from stone, accomplishing something thought impossible. The red comet appeared in the sky around the time of the dragon's hatching. Every sign pointed to her, but there is another candidate who fits certain aspects of the prophecy remarkably well. Jon Snow, revealed at the end, of Game of Thrones to be the secret son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark, has his own claim to being the prophesied hero. His parentage makes him literally the Song of Ice and Fire, born of the union between the dragon bloodline of House Targaryen and the wolf bloodline of House Stark, fire from his father's side and ice from his mother's. Jon's circumstances of birth could fit the prophecy in interesting ways. His mother Lyanna died in what was called the Tower of Joy, bleeding as she gave birth, her tears of sorrow providing the salt, while smoke might represent the conflict and fire of Robert's rebellion that raged outside. The details are stretched, but prophecy often works through such symbolic connections. More compelling is Jon's resurrection. He was killed by his own brothers of the Night's Watch, betrayed and stabbed multiple times, and lay dead for at least a day before Melisandre worked her magic to bring him back. This death and rebirth could represent being reborn as Azor Ahai, literally returning from death to fight against darkness. When Jon came back to life, his wounds were still bleeding, and witnesses reported that steam rose from his body in the cold air, giving us both salt and smoke in the moment of his rebirth. Jon also wields a Valyrian steel sword called Longclaw, given to him by Lord Commander Jorah Mormont. Valyrian steel is incredibly rare and possesses magical properties, including the ability to kill White Walkers. While Longclaw is not literally Lightbringer, it could serve the same symbolic function in the prophecy. Jon uses this blade to fight against the darkness of the White Walkers, leading the defense of the realms of men against the army of the dead. Melisandre, the Red Priestess who has devoted her life to finding and serving Azor Ahai reborn, spent years convinced that Stannis Baratheon was the prophesied hero. She saw visions in her flames that she interpreted as showing Stannis fighting at the head of a great host, defeating darkness and cold. Stannis had certain things in his favor. He had a Targaryen grandmother, connecting him to the bloodline. He wielded a sword that had been magically altered to burn with flames, though whether this was true Lightbringer or simply an enchanted blade remained unclear. But Stannis did not wake any dragons from stone. He was not born on Dragonstone but at Storm's End, far from any volcanic activity. And ultimately, he failed in his campaign, dying in battle without accomplishing the great deeds Melisandre had foreseen. When it became clear that Stannis was not the promised hero, Melisandre had to confront the possibility that she had been wrong, that her interpretations of her visions had led her astray. This failure points to one of the central challenges with the prophecy of Azor Ahai. The signs are specific enough to seem meaningful, but vague enough that multiple people could potentially fit them. If you look hard enough, you can find smoke and salt somewhere in almost anyone's background. Many people have Targaryen blood running in their veins from centuries of intermarriage between noble houses. And when the signs do not quite fit, it becomes tempting to interpret them symbolically or to assume that parts of the prophecy have not yet been fulfilled. Some scholars and readers of prophecy have suggested that the prince that was promised might not be a single individual, but rather multiple people working together. The phrase about the dragon having 3 heads, repeated in various prophetic visions, could mean that 3 people are needed to fulfill the prophecy completely. If dragons have 3 heads on their sigils, perhaps 3 heroes are required, each bringing different strengths and serving different roles. In this interpretation, Daenerys might be one head of the dragon, the one who brings back dragons and represents the fire aspect of the prophecy. Jon could be another head, representing ice and the north, the one who leads the fight against the White Walkers directly. The third head remains uncertain, possibly Tyrion Lannister, with his strategic mind and understanding of how to survive and thrive, or perhaps someone else entirely, a character whose role has not yet fully emerged. What makes the Azor Ahai prophecy particularly interesting is how it has motivated different characters to take action based on their belief in it. Melisandre's entire purpose is built around finding and serving the reborn hero. Her magic, her visions, her counsel to those in power, all stem from her conviction that this prophecy must be fulfilled. When she believed Stannis was Azor Ahai, she supported his claim to the throne above all others, helped him wage war, even created shadow assassins to kill his enemies, all because she thought she was serving a greater purpose. Similarly, the high priest Benero in Volantis preaches to huge crowds about Daenerys being Azor Ahai returned, calling her the child of prophecy who will remake the world and banish darkness forever. His sermons inspire thousands to believe in her cause, to see her not just as a potential conqueror, but as a spiritual savior. This religious dimension adds weight to her political ambitions, transforming her from simply another claimant to the throne into something approaching a divine figure. But there is a darker side to prophecy-driven action. If you believe you are destined to save the world, what limits exist on what you might do to fulfill that destiny? If the prophecy says darkness must be defeated, and you believe yourself to be the chosen one, does that justify any action taken in pursuit of that goal? This kind of thinking can lead to terrible choices justified by the supposed greater good. The prophecy of Azor Ahai includes that disturbing detail about Nissa Nissa, about how the hero must sacrifice the one they love most to create Lightbringer. If someone truly believes they are the prophesied hero, and they interpret this part of the prophecy literally, who might they choose to sacrifice? And what if the prophecy is not meant to be fulfilled literally, but rather understood metaphorically, and the attempt to fulfill it literally causes more harm than good? These questions do not have easy answers, which is perhaps as it should be. Prophecy in this world is meant to be complex, challenging, sometimes cruel in how it reveals truth without providing guidance on what to do with that truth. The prince that was promised and Azor Ahai reborn represent hope that darkness can be defeated, that heroes still exist who will rise to meet existential threats, but they also represent the danger of certainty, of believing so completely in destiny that you lose sight of morality and compassion, and the simple human connections that make life worth defending in the first place. While the Targaryens dream of dragons and fire, and the Eastern priests speak of heroes reborn from ancient times, there exists another form of prophetic sight, one far older than either, one that reaches back to the very roots of Westeros itself. Before the Andals came to Westeros with their seven-pointed star and their iron swords, before even the first men crossed the arm of dawn from Essos, the children of the forest dwelt in the land, living in harmony with nature in ways that humans have never fully understood. Among the children, there arose occasionally individuals with a rare and precious gift called green sight, the ability to experience prophetic dreams that revealed past, present, and future in vivid, symbolic visions. The children called their wise men green seers, and these individuals could do far more than simply see coming events in their sleep. They could enter the minds of animals, experiencing the world through eyes and ears and noses unlike their own. They could connect with the weirwood trees, those ancient white-barked trees with faces carved into their trunks and red leaves that rustle in the wind. Through the weirwoods, greenseers could see anything that had ever happened before any weirwood tree, anywhere in the world, reaching back through thousands of years of accumulated memory. The most powerful greenseers achieved something approaching immortality by merging with the weirwood trees, becoming part of the root system, their consciousness preserved in the wood and sap, even after their physical bodies had long since returned to the earth. They became one with the old gods, or perhaps they were the old gods, their awareness distributed across the entire network of weirwoods that once covered Westeros, watching everything, knowing everything, existing outside normal time. This gift did not disappear entirely when the children of the forest faded from the world. Occasionally, very occasionally, a human would be born with green sight, almost always someone who carried the blood of the first men. The gift seemed connected to the old bloodlines, to families who had lived in Westeros for thousands of years and had intermingled with the children, or at least lived close enough to them to absorb something of their nature. In the current era, the most notable example of green sight among humans belongs to Jojen Reed, the young son of Lord Howland Reed of Greywater Watch. Jojen is small for his age, solemn in a way that seems unnatural for a child, speaking with the gravity of someone much older, because he carries knowledge no child should have. He knows the day of his own death, has seen it in his dreams, and this knowledge weighs on him constantly. Jojen's green dreams came to him after he nearly died from greywater fever as a child. During his fevered state, hovering between life and death, he was visited by a three-eyed crow in his dreams, a strange prophetic figure that opened his eyes to visions of past and future. From that moment forward, Jojen experienced dreams unlike anything most people ever know, dreams so vivid and meaningful that he describes them as more real than waking life. The green dreams come wrapped in symbol and metaphor, requiring interpretation, but Jojen insists with absolute certainty that they always come true. His sister Mira is more skeptical, suggesting that maybe the dreams sometimes come true, but Jojen will not accept this qualification. He has seen enough of his dreams fulfilled exactly as he foresaw them, to know that what he sees in sleep will manifest in waking reality, no matter how strange or unlikely it might seem at the time. When Jojen arrives at Winterfell, he immediately seeks out Bran Stark, because he has dreamed of Bran and knows that the boy is important, that he has a role to play that extends far beyond anything Bran himself understands. In one of his dreams, Jojen saw a winged wolf bound to earth with grey stone chains, and a crow trying to peck through the chains, but the stone was too hard. Jojen understood this dream to mean that Bran has the ability to fly, not literally, but in spirit, that he is meant to be a greenseer himself, but he is trapped by his belief that such things are impossible, chained by the rational skepticism that Maester Luwin taught him. Jojen tells Bran about another green dream, one where Bran was sitting at supper with Maester Luwin, bringing the food instead of a servant. In the dream, Bran received the king's cut from the roast, the tastiest piece, and was able to enjoy his food. But Big Walder and Little Walder Frey, also present in the dream, were eating meat that was old and grey and dead, yet they seemed to enjoy it just as much as Bran enjoyed his fresh portion. This dream puzzled Jojen, but when news arrives that Sir Stevron Frey has died in battle, Jojen understands. The dream was showing that the Frey boys had unknowingly already lost their grandfather, that they were metaphorically eating death without knowing it. This is how green dreams work, revealing truth through imagery that seems nonsensical until events unfold to explain it. The dreams show what will happen, but rarely make clear why it will happen, or what the dreamer should do about it. They are gifts of knowledge that come without instruction manuals, visions that illuminate without explaining. Bran Stark himself possesses green sight, though he does not fully understand or accept it at first. After his fall from the tower in Winterfell, while he lies in a coma hovering between life and death, Bran experiences a powerful dream. In this dream, he sees a three-eyed crow, the same figure that visited Jojen, and the crow tells him that he must fly or die. Bran insists that he cannot fly, that people cannot fly, and the crow responds that he can if he tries. This dream proves prophetic in multiple ways. On the surface level, it foreshadows Bran's eventual ability to warg into birds, experiencing flight through their consciousness. More deeply, it represents his potential to become a greenseer, to see across vast distances and through time itself, which is a kind of flying that transcends physical limitations entirely. The dream is telling him what he can become if he accepts his gifts rather than rejecting them. Bran experiences other prophetic dreams throughout his journey. He dreams of his father Ned Stark in the crypts of Winterfell, at the same time Ned is being executed in King's Landing, somehow knowing that his father is dead before any raven brings the news. His younger brother Rickon has the exact same dream that same night, both boys crying out in their sleep and waking to insist that their father is dead and down in the crypts. This shared dreaming suggests they both have some measure of green sight, receiving the same visions simultaneously. The dreams also show Bran glimpses of what is happening elsewhere in the world. He sees through the eyes of his direwolf Summer, experiencing the hunt and the fight in vivid sensory detail. But more than this, he sometimes has dreams where he is Summer, where there is no distinction between boy and wolf, where he runs and kills and feeds as a predator does, with the direwolf's instincts and the human's cunning working together in perfect unity. As Bran's powers develop, the dreams become more than just visions received passively. He learns to actively enter the state of green sight, slipping his consciousness into Summer's body at will, while his human form sits motionless. He experiences what it is like to be Hodor, the gentle giant of a man who carries Bran everywhere, and discovers that he can push Hodor's consciousness aside and control the man's body directly. This ability proves useful but also deeply troubling, as Bran realizes he is violating Hodor's autonomy, using him without his true consent. The ultimate expression of Bran's green sight comes when he travels far north of the wall to find the three-eyed raven, the figure who has been appearing in his dreams, urging him to fly. This three-eyed raven turns out to be the last green seer, an ancient man who has lived for over 1,000 years by merging with a weirwood tree in a cave deep beneath the earth. His body has become one with the roots, his flesh and the wood intertwined until they are inseparable. This green seer, known in life as Brynden Rivers, or Lord Bloodraven, teaches Bran how to truly use his gifts. Under Bloodraven's instruction, Bran learns to connect with the weirwood network, to send his consciousness into the trees and experience their accumulated memories. He can witness events from thousands of years ago as clearly as if he were there, watching the first men carve faces into the weirwoods, seeing the children of the forest when they were numerous and powerful. Most remarkably, Bran discovers he can do more than simply observe the past. He can interact with it, sending whispers through time that people in the past can sometimes hear. This revelation is both empowering and terrifying, suggesting that time itself is not fixed, but rather a fluid thing where cause and effect can work backward as well as forward. Bran realizes that the whispers he heard in his dreams, the voice calling his name through the trees, came from himself in the future, reaching back through time to guide his younger self. The implications of this are staggering. If Bran can affect the past, does he in some sense create his own destiny? The stable boy Hodor's real name was Wylis, and he could speak normally until something traumatic happened to him as a young man. We learn that Bran, in a moment of crisis, reached back through time and warged into young Wylis's mind, while simultaneously warging into the present-day Hodor. This dual connection across time caused Hodor's mind to experience his own death before it happened, the shock of it reducing his speech to endlessly repeating "hold the door," which slurred into Hodor. Bran essentially created the trauma that shaped Hodor's entire life, closing a temporal loop in a way that is both tragic and profound. The green dreams and green sight of the old gods operate on fundamentally different principles than the dragon dreams of the Targaryens or the visions in flames that Melisandre sees. Green sight is connected to the earth itself, to the ancient trees and the spirits or consciousness that dwells within them. It is tied to specific locations, to the heart trees in Godswoods, where the old gods are said to be strongest, where dragon dreams seem to come from within the dreamer's own bloodline. Green sight comes from outside, from a connection with something vast and ancient that existed before humans walked the earth. The children of the forest, who gave this gift to certain humans through whatever mysterious process allowed the transfer, understood that green sight came with heavy responsibilities. To see the future is to bear the burden of knowledge about what cannot be changed. Jojen knows when he will die, and this knowledge torments him even as he accepts it as inevitable. He becomes increasingly resigned and melancholy as his journey progresses, knowing that each day brings him closer to the fate he has already witnessed. Bran struggles with different aspects of the gift. The ability to see through time, to enter the minds of others, to experience events from multiple perspectives simultaneously. These gifts could easily drive someone mad if they cannot maintain a sense of who they are. Bloodraven warns Bran that he must be careful not to lose himself in the visions, not to spend so much time living through the eyes of animals or dwelling in memories of the past that he forgets he is Bran Stark of Winterfell. There is also the question of what responsibility comes with the knowledge Greenside provides. If Bran can see the past and future, If he knows what will happen and what has happened, what is his obligation to act on that knowledge? Should he try to prevent tragedies he sees coming? Or would such intervention potentially make things worse? The stable time loop of Hodor's origin suggests that attempting to change the past may be impossible, or may only succeed in creating the very events you were trying to prevent. The old gods, whatever they truly are, do not seem to operate with the same concern for individual human welfare that the newer gods claim to have. They observe and remember, preserving everything in the weirwood's memory, but they do not obviously intervene to prevent suffering or injustice. The green seers who serve them become more and more inhuman over time, losing their connection to mortal concerns as they merge with the eternal consciousness of the trees. Perhaps this is inevitable when you can see all of time spread out before you like a tapestry, when you know that individual lives, no matter how important they seem in the moment, are just brief threads in a pattern so vast it extends across millennia. From such a perspective, the death of one person or 100 or 1,000 might seem no more significant than leaves falling from trees in autumn. Part is of the natural cycle that must be accepted rather than fought against. Yet greensight continues to manifest in humans precisely because it serves a purpose beyond simple observation. Jojen travels to find Bran because his dreams show him that he must, that Bran needs guidance to fulfill whatever role he is meant to play. Bloodraven spends centuries slowly dying in his cave, specifically to wait for Bran, to pass on his knowledge to the next green seer, who will carry the memory of the world forward. The gift demands action, requires those who possess it to use it for something, even if the full purpose remains unclear. The green dreams remind us that prophecy in Westeros is not just about predicting wars and rulers and grand political movements. It is also about the deeper currents of magic and memory that flow beneath the surface of ordinary life, about connections between past and future that most people never glimpse, about becoming part of something so much larger than yourself that individual identity becomes almost meaningless. Greensight is perhaps the oldest form of prophecy in Westeros, predating even the arrival of humans, and it carries with it echoes of a time when the world was younger and stranger than it has become. Yet not all prophecy comes from ancient bloodlines or mystical connections to the weirwood trees. Sometimes prophecy comes not in dreams or visions, but from the lips of those who have bargained with powers beyond mortal ken for the ability to glimpse what others cannot see. And sometimes these prophecies, spoken once in childhood, echo through an entire life, shaping every decision, coloring every relationship, transforming joy into suspicion and triumph into paranoia. This is what happened to Cersei Lannister when, as a girl of perhaps 12 years, she visited a fortune teller and heard words that would haunt her for the rest of her days. The fortune teller was known as Maggie the Frog, though this was not her true name, but rather a corruption of Maegi, a term from Essos for those who practice blood magic and other dark arts. Maggie had come to Westeros as the wife of a spice trader, settling in Lannisport, where she earned a reputation for telling fortunes, providing cures, and selling love potions from her ramshackle home. She was ancient and ugly, with yellowed eyes, greenish skin, covered in warts, and gaps where her teeth had fallen out. Everything about her suggested danger and wrongness, but that did not stop young girls from seeking her out, hoping to learn secrets about their futures. Cersei went to see Maggie on a dare from her friend, Melara Heatherspoon, during a great tourney at Lannisport. The two girls had been drinking wine stolen from the feast, emboldened by the festivities and the intoxication, and Melara suggested they visit the old woman everyone whispered about, but no one would admit to consulting. Cersei, who even then was arrogant and dismissive of consequences, agreed immediately. She was convinced she would one day marry Prince Rhaegar Targaryen, would become queen, would have everything she desired, and she wanted Maggie to confirm this glorious future. They found Maggie in her dwelling, woke her from sleep, and when the old woman told them to leave, Cersei responded with all the hauteur of a Lannister, reminding Maggie that she was on Lannister lands and that Cersei's father was Lord Tywin, the most powerful man in the realm. Cersei threatened to have the old woman's eyes gouged out if she refused to tell their fortunes. This was perhaps the worst possible way to approach someone with genuine power, showing nothing but contempt and expecting submission. But young Cersei did not understand what she was dealing with. Maggie, rather than being cowed, chuckled at the girl's threats. She agreed to tell the fortunes, but warned that she could answer only 3 questions, and that the girls would not like what they heard. She demanded a price, a taste of blood from each of them, and Cersei cut her finger on a knife Maggie provided, letting drops of her blood fall into a bowl. This was no mere symbolic gesture, but an actual blood magic ritual, the old woman drinking power and knowledge from the girl's very life force. Cersei asked her first question. When would she wed Prince Rhaegar? She had been promised to him, or so she believed, her father having proposed a marriage alliance between House Lannister and House Targaryen. In Cersei's mind, this marriage was all but certain, just a matter of time before it would be announced, and she would get everything she had ever dreamed of. Maggie's answer shattered those dreams with brutal simplicity. Never, she said. Cersei would never marry the prince. Instead, she would marry the king. Young Cersei did not understand at first. How could she marry a king if not Rhaegar, who was heir to the throne? But Maggie had seen what Cersei could not, that Rhaegar would never be king, that the Targaryen dynasty would fall, and that a different man would claim the Iron Throne and take Cersei as his bride. Cersei asked to clarify, would she be queen though? And Maggie confirmed this with words that seemed like a blessing, but carried a curse within them. Yes, she would be queen, for a time, until another came, someone younger and more beautiful, who would cast Cersei down and take everything she held dear. In those few words, Maggie planted a seed of paranoia that would grow and spread through Cersei's entire life, making her see every attractive younger woman as a potential threat, poisoning any possibility of genuine friendship or alliance with other women. For her third question, Cersei asked about children. Would she and the king have children together? Again, Maggie's answer held truth within apparent contradiction. The king would have 20 children, she said, but Cersei would have only 3. Gold would be their crowns, and gold their shrouds, a phrase that suggested royalty but also death, that all 3 of Cersei's children would become monarchs, but would not survive to old age. In the books, Maggie's prophecy included one additional element that the show omitted, but that carries terrible significance. She told Cersei that when her tears had drowned her, when she had lost everything, the Valonqar would wrap his hands about her pale white throat and choke the life from her. Valonqar is the High Valyrian word for little brother, and Cersei immediately assumed this meant Tyrion, the younger brother she had despised from the moment of his birth. The prophecy proved accurate in ways that would only become clear over the following decades. King Aerys refused Tywin's proposal of marriage between Cersei and Rhaegar, so Cersei did not marry the prince. Instead, after Robert's rebellion succeeded and the Targaryen dynasty fell, Cersei wed King Robert Baratheon as part of the alliance that secured Robert's hold on the throne. She became queen exactly as prophesied, but not through the romantic destiny she had imagined. Robert did indeed father many children, bastards scattered across the realm from his countless infidelities, though not quite 20 as Maggie had stated in the books, or exactly 20 as the show claimed. But none of these children were Cersei's. Her 3 children, Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen, were all fathered by her twin brother Jaime, born from an incestuous relationship that began in childhood and never truly ended despite Cersei's marriage. The detail about gold crowns and gold shrouds proved grimly prophetic. All 3 of Cersei's children did indeed wear crowns. Joffrey became king after Robert's death. Tommen became king after Joffrey was poisoned at his own wedding. Myrcella was crowned Princess of Dawn, which the book suggests may yet become something more before her story ends. But all 3 also met early deaths, dying before their mother, despite every effort Cersei made to protect them. The prophecy about the younger, more beautiful queen who would cast Cersei down and take all she held dear became the driving force behind much of Cersei's cruelty and paranoia. She suspected every woman who might threaten her position. When Margaery Tyrell married first Joffrey and then Tommen, becoming queen in Cersei's place, Cersei became convinced that Margaery was the younger queen from the prophecy. She orchestrated elaborate schemes to destroy Margaery, eventually having her arrested by the Faith of the Seven on charges of adultery and treason. But the prophecy likely referred not to Margaery, but to Daenerys Targaryen, who was certainly younger and whose exotic silver-gold beauty was considered almost supernatural. Daenerys did ultimately cast Cersei down, conquering King's Landing with dragonfire and ending Cersei's reign. In doing so, Daenerys took everything Cersei held dear, her power, her city, and finally her life when the Red Keep collapsed around her. The most controversial part of the prophecy, the Valonqar who would kill Cersei, never explicitly came to pass in the show, since that part was omitted. In the books, it remains unfulfilled, creating tension as readers wonder which brother will ultimately end Cersei's life. Many assume it will be Tyrion, given Cersei's hatred of him and her conviction that he will be her death. But others point out that Jaime is technically younger than Cersei by a matter of minutes, born second though they are twins, making him a Valonqar as well. The possibility that Jaime might be the one prophesied to kill Cersei creates a tragic poetry. She has loved him her entire life, seen him as literally the other half of herself, the one person who truly understands her. To have her death come at his hands would be the ultimate betrayal, or perhaps the ultimate expression of their twisted bond, one final act that would bind them together even in death. In the show's ending, Cersei and Jaime die together in the collapsing Red Keep, crushed beneath falling stones as they attempt to flee the city. Jaime has his hands around Cersei in this moment, holding her, comforting her, but not strangling her. Some viewers interpreted this as a twisted fulfillment of the Valonqar prophecy, with Jaime's hands on Cersei as she dies. But if so, it was not the violent choking death that Maggie described. The accuracy of most of Maggie's prophecy gave it tremendous power over Cersei's life. From the moment she heard those words, Cersei interpreted everything that happened through the lens of the prophecy. When Robert showed more interest in Ned Stark's daughter than in their own child, Cersei saw it as a potential threat. When Marjorie began to influence Tommen, Cersei saw the younger queen coming to supplant her. Every attractive woman, every rival for power or attention, became another potential fulfillment of the prophecy. This fear drove Cersei to increasingly desperate and cruel actions. She alienated potential allies, destroyed people who might have helped her, and Mesa eventually resorted to wildfire and mass murder to eliminate threats. In trying to prevent the prophecy from coming true, she ensured that it would, her actions creating the very circumstances that would lead to her downfall. The tragedy of Maggie's prophecy is that Cersei might have lived a different life if she had never heard those words. She was always ambitious and hungry for power, always willing to be ruthless when she felt threatened, but the specific paranoia about younger queens and the certainty that her children would die before her time poisoned any possibility of happiness or peace. She could never trust, never let her guard down, never simply enjoy the power and privilege she possessed, because she was always waiting for the other crown to drop, for the prophecy to complete its work. And yet, the prophecy also revealed truths about Cersei's character that would have manifested regardless. The fact that none of her children were Robert's was not caused by the prophecy, but by her choice to continue her relationship with Jaime throughout her marriage. Her inability to form genuine bonds with other women predated Maggie's words, rooted in her belief that women were weak and that the only way to have power was to think and act like a man. The prophecy did not create these flaws, but it did provide a framework through which they could flourish and intensify. Maggie's prophecy demonstrates how personal and specific prophecy can be in this world. This was not about saving civilization or defeating ancient evils, but about one woman's life, the trajectory of her ambitions and fears and eventual destruction. The prophecy gave Cersei knowledge but not wisdom, foresight but not understanding, and in the end that knowledge may have been more curse than gift, showing her the shape of her doom without giving her the tools to avoid it. Beyond the great prophecies that shape the fates of kingdoms and dynasties, beyond even the personal curses that haunt individual lives, there exist countless smaller visions, dreams, and predictions scattered throughout the story, each revealing pieces of truth in their own way. These visions do not always carry the weight of world-changing significance, but they matter deeply to the individuals who experience them, and sometimes they point toward larger truths that connect in unexpected ways. Jon Snow, serving at the Wall as a member of the Night's Watch, experiences several disturbing dreams during his time there. In one particularly vivid nightmare, he finds himself in the crypts beneath Winterfell, the cold stone halls where the kings of winter sit on their thrones with iron swords across their laps and direwolf statues at their feet. In the dream, Jon walks through these crypts searching for something, calling out for help, but no one answers. He climbs down into deeper and deeper levels of the crypts, descending into darkness without a torch, feeling the walls as he goes. The dream fills him with dread, because he knows something terrible waits below, though he cannot see what it is. He cries out that he is not a Stark, that this place is not meant for him, that he does not belong here. But the dream compels him to continue descending anyway. The darkness grows absolute, and still he continues downward, driven by a need he does not understand. This dream proves prophetic in multiple ways. On the surface, It reflects Jon's insecurity about his place in the Stark family, his status as a bastard who bears the Stark name, but does not have their rights and legitimacy. The crypts are reserved for true Starks, and Jon's cry that he does not belong there stems from a lifetime of being reminded that he is outside the family's innermost circle. But the deeper meaning becomes clear later, when Jon learns the truth about his parentage. He is not Ned Stark's bastard son, but rather the child of Ned's sister Lyanna and Prince Rhaegar Targaryen, which makes him a Targaryen by blood, not a Stark. Yet, the dream pulls him into the crypts anyway, because his mother is buried there, her body resting in those cold halls, even though few know the full truth of what she meant to the realm's history. The dream reflects a truth Jon does not yet consciously know, that he belongs in the crypts not as Ned's son, but as Lyanna's, connecting him to the Starks through blood that runs deeper than the bastard name he has carried all his life. The ghost of High Heart, a mysterious dwarf woman who lives in the Riverlands, possesses her own form of prophetic sight. She is incredibly ancient, possibly one of the children of the forest, or a human with their blood running strong in her veins. When she speaks, she describes visions of future events with disturbing accuracy, though her words are often wrapped in poetic language that makes their meaning unclear until after the events have occurred. The ghost of High Heart saw a maid at a feast with purple serpents in her hair, venom dripping from their mouths. This vision foretold Sansa Stark's presence at Joffrey's wedding, where she unknowingly wore a hairnet containing poison that would be used to kill the young king. The purple serpents were the amethysts in the hairnet, and the venom was quite literal, the strangler poison that choked Joffrey to death, even as he tried to drink wine to soothe his constricted throat. She spoke of a man without a face waiting on a bridge that swayed and swung. This referred to the wedding of Edmure Tully at the Twins, the bridge castle of House Frey, where faceless men, in a symbolic sense, men without honor or loyalty, would betray Guestright and murder Robb Stark and his followers in what became known as the Red Wedding. The swaying bridge represented the twins themselves, and the man without a face was either Walder Frey, who had no honor, or perhaps a more literal interpretation involving the preparations for the massacre. She saw many crowns, she said, each one representing a king or queen who would rise and fall in the chaos following Robert Baratheon's death. Her visions were fragmentary, pieces of a larger tapestry that she could glimpse but not fully comprehend, and she found them disturbing enough that she demanded strong drink before she would speak of them, needing to dull her senses to tolerate the weight of what she saw. Patchface, the fool who serves Stannis Baratheon's household, speaks in riddles and nonsense songs that seem like the babbling of a simpleton, but that sometimes contain prophetic truths. Patchface nearly drowned as a child when the ship bringing him to Westeros sank in a storm, and though he was dead when pulled from the water, somehow he returned to life. But the boy who came back was not quite the same as the one who had drowned. His words since then have been strange and unsettling, often referencing the sea and what lies beneath it. He sings about the dead rising at the bottom of the sea, about shadows dancing in the drowned king's court, about bells ringing and fool's gold in the water. These cryptic verses have been interpreted as predictions about the return of the drowned god's servants, about the Greyjoys and their religion of the drowned god, about the wildfire explosion during the Battle of the Blackwater, about many things that have come to pass or may yet occur. but Patchface himself does not seem to understand what he is saying, the words flowing from him without conscious thought, as if something from the deep speaks through him. Quaith of the Shadow, a mysterious masked woman from the far eastern city of Ashai, appears to Daenerys Targaryen multiple times to offer cryptic warnings and advice. She tells Daenerys to beware the pale mare, to distrust the perfumed seneschal, to remember who she is and where she comes from. Her warnings are maddeningly vague, phrased in ways that could mean multiple things depending on interpretation. When Quaith tells Daenerys that to go forward she must go back, to reach the light she must pass beneath the shadow, these riddles might mean that Daenerys must return to her roots, must embrace the fire and blood of her Targaryen heritage, rather than trying to rule through gentleness and compromise. Or they might mean something else entirely, pointing toward journeys both literal and metaphorical that Daenerys has yet to complete. The most disturbing aspect of Quaith's prophecies is that we do not know her motivations or what she gains from advising Daenerys. She appears without invitation, speaks her cryptic words, and vanishes, making it impossible to question her or demand clearer guidance. Is she trying to help Daenerys or manipulate her? Does she see the future or merely one possible version of it? Her mastered face and her connection to Ashai, a city known for dark sorcery and forbidden knowledge, suggest she serves purposes we cannot fully understand. Miri Maz-Dur, the Magi who attended to Drogo after his injury and who performed the blood magic, ritual that cost Daenerys her child and left Drogo in a vegetative state, delivered what might be considered a prophecy or might simply be a cruel statement of impossible conditions when Daenerys asked when Drogo would return to her as he was before. Miri said Drogo would be as he was when the sun rises in the west and sets in the east, when the seas go dry and mountains blow in the wind like leaves, when Daenerys' womb quickens again and she bears a living child. Only then would Drogo return. These words were meant to convey that Drogo would never recover, that the conditions described were impossible, and therefore Daenerys waited for something that would never happen. But in the mystical, metaphor-laden world of prophecy, impossible things sometimes come to pass in unexpected ways. Quentyn Martell, whose house sigil is a sun, travelled west from Dawn toward Meereen and died there, which could metaphorically represent the sun rising in the west and setting in the east. The Dothraki sea is a grassland that could go dry, in a sense, if it were burned or devastated. Mountains blowing like leaves might refer to pyramids or great structures collapsing, or to massive change that reshapes the landscape. And when Daenerys rides Drogon for the first time, truly bonding with her dragon in a moment of acceptance and power, she experiences physical sensations that might suggest her womb quickening, her body responding to the magic and fire that surrounds her. These interpretations may be stretches, reading too much into symbolic language, but in a world where prophecy is real, where impossible things happen regularly, we cannot entirely dismiss the possibility that Miri's curse was actually a hidden prophecy, describing conditions that would be fulfilled in ways no one expected. The Dothraki themselves have prophetic traditions, particularly regarding a figure called the Stallion who mounts the world. When Daenerys eats a stallion's heart as part of a ritual during her pregnancy, the Dosh Khaleen, the crones who speak for the Dothraki prophecies, announce that her son Rhaego will be this prophesied stallion, a leader who will unite all the Khalasars into one Khalasar and lead them to conquer the world, trampling nations beneath their horses' hooves like grass beneath the hooves of a great herd. This prophecy seemed to die with Rhaego when Miri Mazdur's blood magic killed the child in the womb. But some interpret the prophecy as having been fulfilled in an unexpected way, with Daenerys herself being the stallion who mounts the world. She united multiple Khalasars to her service, burned the Khals who tried to dismiss her, and led Dothraki warriors across the sea for the first time in their history to conquer a foreign land. If the prophecy can apply to a woman as easily as to a man, then Daenerys accomplished what was foretold, becoming the leader who would unite the scattered Dothraki and lead them to war. Ned Stark's fever dreams, while imprisoned in King's Landing, are not exactly prophetic, but contain truths wrapped in memory and delirium. He dreams of the Tower of Joy, the place where his sister Lyanna died, and in those dreams he relives finding her in a bed of blood, her final words about promises he must keep. These dreams are memories, but they also contain knowledge that Ned has suppressed, truths he cannot consciously acknowledge even to himself about what really happened at that tower and what those promises meant. The intermingling of memory and vision in Ned's dreams suggests that prophecy in this world is not always about seeing the future. Sometimes it is about seeing the past clearly, understanding events that were obscured by immediate necessity, recognizing patterns and connections that were invisible at the time, but that take on profound meaning when viewed with the distance of years and the clarity that comes from removing defensive rationalizations. All these scattered visions and prophecies, from the grand to the personal, from the clear to the cryptic, demonstrate that the world of ice and fire is saturated with prophetic meaning. Dreams are never just dreams in this world. Visions carry weight. Words spoken by those touched by supernatural sight echo forward through time, creating ripples that change the course of lives and kingdoms. Every character who experiences prophetic dreams or receives warnings from seers must wrestle with what to do with that knowledge, how to interpret it, whether to act on it or try to avoid it, whether the future they glimpse is fixed or fluid. Yet among all these visions of individual fates and the rise and fall of heroes, there exists a prophecy so vast in scope, so final in its implications, that it dwarfs even the threat of eternal winter. There is a prophecy spoken of by the Dothraki, those fierce horse lords of the eastern grasslands, that speaks not of heroes or saviors, but of an ending so complete, so final, that it makes even the threat of the Yssi long night seem almost gentle by comparison. It is a prophecy about grass of all things, but grass that glows in the darkness and kills everything it touches. Grass that will one day cover the entire world and bring about the end of all life. The Dothraki spend their lives on the great grasslands they call the Dothraki Sea, an ocean of green that stretches for thousands of miles across the heart of Essos. The grass itself is life to them, feeding their horses, providing cover for game, marking the endless trails their Khalasars follow generation after generation. To people who live their entire existence moving through grass, who measure distances by how long it takes to ride through certain types of terrain, who know 100 different words for different varieties of grass, and what each means for travel and survival. The idea of grass becoming an agent of death carries a special horror. Far to the east, beyond even the mysterious city of Ashai, where shadowbinders practice their dark arts and dragons are said to have been born before the Valyrians ever found them, lies a region called the Shadowlands. These are mountains so tall that they cast perpetual darkness over the valleys beneath them. where sunlight penetrates only for brief moments at high noon. It is a place of such wrongness that even sailors who regularly voyage to Ashai, itself considered one of the strangest and most unsettling places in the world, speak of the Shadowlands with dread. In these lightless valleys grows a type of vegetation found nowhere else in the world. The Dothraki call it ghost grass, and its appearance explains the name perfectly. The stalks are as pale as milk, growing tall enough that a man on horseback could be completely hidden among them. They have an almost translucent quality, like glass or ice, and at night they glow with an eerie phosphorescence, filling the dark valleys with cold, ghostly light. But the truly terrible quality of ghost grass is not how it looks, but what it does. Ghost grass kills all other vegetation it encounters. Where it grows, nothing else can survive. It chokes out normal grass, poisons the soil against other plants, spreads slowly but inevitably, turning living green landscapes into fields of pale, glowing death. The Dothraki believe, and perhaps they are right, that ghost grass glows with the spirits of the damned, that the light it gives off is the anguish of souls trapped within it, crying out in the darkness. When Daenerys first hears of ghost grass from Ser Jorah Mormont, during her journey across the Dothraki Sea, she is struck by the beauty of the endless green around them, marveling at how alive everything seems. Jorah's response is to tell her about ghost grass, to explain that the Dothraki believe this beauty is temporary, that one day the ghost grass will spread from the Shadowlands, will cover the Dothraki Sea and every other grassland, will eventually blanket the entire world. And when that happens, when every blade of green grass has been replaced by pale, glowing ghost grass, all life will end. This is not a prophecy about war or conquest or any human-caused disaster. It is an environmental apocalypse, a vision of the world slowly succumbing to a force of nature gone wrong. Vegetation that has somehow become toxic and unstoppable. The ghost grass does not care about the games people play for power. It does not distinguish between the noble and the base, the innocent and the guilty. It simply grows and kills and spreads, patient and inevitable. The parallel to the White Walkers and their threat is obvious and probably intentional. Both represent a slow, inexorable force moving across the land, turning life into death, green into white. The White Walkers advance from the north, bringing winter that never ends. The ghost grass spreads from the east, bringing a different kind of death, but no less final. Both suggest that the real threats to the world are not the conflicts between humans, but rather forces that exist beyond human control or comprehension. Powers that will continue regardless of who sits on which throne or which house, defeats which other house in battle. The Dothraki are a warrior culture, proud and fierce, believing that strength and skill in battle are what matter most in life. Yet even they acknowledge through this prophecy that there are some enemies that cannot be defeated through strength of arms. You cannot fight grass with a sword. You cannot shoot arrows at a spreading weed. The ghost grass prophecy suggests a certain humility in the Dothraki worldview, a recognition that for all their power and pride, they are still vulnerable to forces beyond their ability to resist. What makes this prophecy particularly haunting is its slow timescale. The White Walkers, when they march, move with deliberate purpose, creating an immediate crisis that demands immediate response. But ghost grass spreads slowly, growing season by season, advancing perhaps a few feet per year or even slower. The end it promises might be thousands of years away, so distant that it is easy to ignore, easy to dismiss as someone else's problem, something future generations will deal with if it proves to be real at all. Yet Xaro Shoan Daxos, the wealthy merchant prince of Qarth, tells Daenerys that ghost grass has begun growing in the Garden of Gehenna, a place within or near Qarth itself, far from the Shadowlands where it naturally occurs. If this is true, it suggests the ghost grass is spreading, that the prophecy is not merely theoretical, but actively unfolding, that the end it promises has already begun, even if it proceeds too slowly for any individual human life to notice the progress. The timing of Xaro's revelation is significant. He shares this information after Daenerys has destroyed the House of the Undying and killed the warlocks of Qarth, after her dragons have burned their way through ancient magic and demonstrated their power. The growth of ghost grass in Qarth coincides with the return of dragons to the world and the strengthening of magic that followed. This raises uncomfortable questions about whether the ghost grass responds to magic, whether its spread might be accelerating now that dragons live again and ancient powers are waking. If ghost grass is connected to magic, then its growth might not be steady and predictable, but rather tied to the ebb and flow of supernatural forces in the world. When magic was weak, during the century and a half when dragons were extinct, perhaps the ghost grass remained contained in the Shadowlands, dormant and limited. But now that magic has returned with such intensity, perhaps the ghost grass is waking as well, beginning the slow conquest that the Dothraki have always feared. The prophecy about ghost grass covering the world is strikingly similar to prophecies from various cultures about how the world will end. In Westeros, they speak of the long night, eternal winter, darkness that never lifts. In Ashai, they have prophecies about Azor Ahai returning to fight the darkness. The Dothraki prophecy is their version of these end times predictions, shaped by their culture and their environment. A people who live on grasslands naturally imagine the end coming through grass, just as the people of the frozen north imagine it coming as winter. This suggests that the ghost grass prophecy might be another way of describing the same fundamental threat, a different cultural interpretation of the same apocalyptic vision. Perhaps the White Walkers in the west and the ghost grass in the east are two manifestations of the same force, two different ways that death and cold and ending express themselves in different parts of the world. Perhaps they are connected through deep magic, two arms of the same entity reaching out to strangle life from opposite directions. Or perhaps they are entirely separate threats, which is somehow even more terrifying. The people of Westeros focus their attention on the White Walkers, because that is the danger they face, the enemy marching toward them from beyond the wall. But what if defeating the White Walkers does not save the world, only delays one form of ending, while another continues to grow unchecked in the far east? What if humanity could somehow triumph over the army of the dead, only to discover, centuries later, that the world is dying anyway, as ghost grass slowly consumes everything? The ghost grass prophecy forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about the nature of existence in this world. No matter how many wars are won, how many conflicts are resolved, how much heroes sacrifice to save their people, the world itself may be moving toward an ending that cannot be prevented. The White Walkers can potentially be defeated because they have a leader who can be killed, because they can be fought with dragonglass and Valyrian steel and fire. But how do you defeat grass? How do you kill a plant that spreads through natural growth, that has no mind to outwit, no heart to pierce, no weakness to exploit. This is perhaps why the Dothraki speak of the Ghostgrass prophecy with such fatalistic acceptance. They do not talk about ways to fight it or strategies to prevent it. They simply acknowledge it as the way the world will end, as inevitable as the rising and setting of the sun. Their culture is built around accepting harsh realities, around understanding that death comes to everyone eventually, whether through battle or old age or accident. The ghost grass is simply death on a larger scale, the end of not just individuals but of everything. Yet there is something almost peaceful about this vision of the ending compared to other prophecies. The ghost grass does not bring suffering in the traditional sense. It does not torture or enslave. It simply grows, and as it grows, life fades. In a strange way, it is a gentler apocalypse than armies of the dead or eternal winter, a slow dimming rather than a violent extinction. The world filled with glowing ghost grass might be beautiful in its own terrible way, fields of pale light stretching to every horizon, a monument to what was even as it ensures nothing new will ever grow. The prophecy remains unfulfilled in the main narrative, present only as distant knowledge, a threat so far removed from immediate concerns that characters rarely think about it. But it lingers in the background of the story, a reminder that even if every conflict in Westeros was resolved, even if the perfect ruler sat the Iron Throne and peace reigned across all kingdoms, the world itself might still be dying, slowly but certainly, claimed by grass that glows with the light of lost souls. In the end, the ghost grass prophecy speaks to the deepest fear underlying all the others, the fear that nothing we do ultimately matters, that forces beyond our control will sweep away everything we build and everything we are. It is the prophecy that says there may be no salvation, no hero who can save us, no action that will prevent the ending. It is simply the way things are, the way things will be, the inevitable conclusion written into the nature of the world itself. And perhaps that is the most honest prophecy of all, the one that acknowledges what all the others dance around, that endings are not always battles to be won, but simply the final chapter that comes to every story, whether we are ready for it or not. This brings us to perhaps the most important truth about prophecy in Westeros, one that runs through every vision and dream we have explored tonight. Perhaps the most important truth is that prophecy is always open to interpretation, and that interpretation is where things become dangerous. The same vision can be understood in multiple ways, depending on who is analyzing it and what they want or need it to mean. This ambiguity is not a flaw in prophetic sight, but rather an inherent feature of how knowledge of the future manifests in a world where time and causality do not work as simply as we might wish. Consider how many different people have been identified as potentially fulfilling the prophecy of Azor Ahai, or the prince that was promised. Melisandre was absolutely certain that Stannis Baratheon was the prophesied hero, and she could point to specific details that seemed to support this interpretation. Stannis' grandmother was a Targaryen, giving him the blood of the dragon. He wielded a sword that burned with the magical flames. He was fighting against the darkness in a literal sense, leading armies north to defend the wall against the White Walkers. But when Stannis failed, when he died in battle without accomplishing the great deeds the prophecy promised, Melisandre had to confront the possibility that she had been wrong all along. Her visions had not lied, but her interpretation of those visions had led her to champion the wrong man. She had seen shadows and flames and read them to mean Stannis when they might have meant someone else entirely. Later, she becomes convinced that Jon Snow is the promised prince, and again she can point to evidence. Jon has Targaryen blood through his father Rhaegar. He was brought back from death, literally reborn, which could fulfill the prophecy's requirement in an unexpected way. He leads the fight against the White Walkers. He unites different factions in common cause against the darkness. These are all compelling points that support identifying Jon as the prophesied hero. Yet Maester Aemon believed the prince was Daenerys, and his reasoning was equally sound. She was born at Dragonstone, a place of smoke and salt. She hatched dragons from stone eggs, accomplishing something thought impossible. The red comet appeared in the sky around the time of her dragon's birth. She has the strongest Targaryen blood, being the daughter of a king rather than a more distant descendant. She has built an army and is moving to reclaim the throne that was taken from her family. Each interpretation makes sense based on certain readings of the prophecy's requirements. Each has evidence to support it. And yet, they cannot all be right. Or perhaps they can if the prophecy refers not to a single individual, but to multiple people working together, each fulfilling different aspects of what is needed to defeat darkness. This multiplicity of interpretation is not limited to the major prophecies. Even smaller, more personal predictions can be understood in different ways. When Maggie told Cersei that a younger, more beautiful queen would cast her down, Cersei immediately began seeing threats everywhere. She suspected Margaery Tyrell, who was certainly younger, and who married both of Cersei's sons to become queen. The interpretation seemed obvious, and Cersei acted on it, working to destroy Margaery and eliminate the threat she represented. But Margaery, while she did briefly hold the title of queen and did threaten Cersei's power, was not ultimately the one who cast Cersei down and took all she held dear. That role fell to Daenerys Targaryen, who was also younger and more beautiful, and who actually succeeded in conquering King's Landing and ending Cersei's reign. If Cersei had correctly identified Daenerys as the true threat from the prophecy, she might have prepared differently, might have made alliances or strategic decisions that would have given her a better chance of surviving. Or perhaps she would not have. Perhaps trying to avoid a prophecy only ensures it comes true through the very actions taken to prevent it. This is the paradox of the self-fulfilling prophecy, where knowledge of the future becomes part of the mechanism that brings that future about. If Cersei had never heard Maggie's words, would she have been less paranoid, less cruel, less likely to alienate potential allies? And if she had been different, would she have ended up in the same place anyway? Or would her ignorance have allowed her to live longer and perhaps even die of natural causes? The problem is that we can never know. Once someone has received a prophecy, their actions are forever colored by that knowledge. Even trying not to think about it, trying to act as if you never heard the prediction, is still a choice influenced by the prophecy. There is no way to return to a state of innocent ignorance once you have glimpsed what might come. This is why some wise men and women in Westeros avoid seeking out prophetic knowledge. Grand Maester Pycelle, for all his flaws, understood that prophecies were dangerous precisely because they were often true enough to be compelling, but vague enough to mislead. He dismissed prophecy not out of pure skepticism, but out of a recognition that acting on prophetic knowledge often caused more problems than it solved. The danger of certainty cannot be overstated. When Melisandre was certain Stannis was Azor Ahai, she performed terrible acts in his service, including creating shadow assassins to murder his enemies. She believed she was serving a greater purpose, helping the prophesied hero claim his rightful place. But in reality, she was simply committing murders that weakened the forces that should have been uniting against the true threat from the north. When Rhaegar became certain that prophecy demanded he have 3 children, and that his son would be the prince that was promised, he made decisions that destroyed his family and plunged the realm into war. His certainty overrode his judgment, his sense of duty to his wife and first children, his understanding of political realities. He believed he was fulfilling destiny, but he may have been simply making catastrophic mistakes based on incomplete information. When Cersei was certain that Marjorie was the younger queen who would destroy her, she became so focused on that threat that she missed other, more serious dangers. Her certainty made her blind to alternatives, unable to consider that she might be wrong, or that the prophecy might mean something different than she thought. This pattern repeats throughout the story. Certainty about prophecy leads to tunnel vision, to making choices that seem justified if the interpretation is correct, but that prove disastrous if the interpretation is wrong. And since prophecy is always ambiguous, always open to multiple readings, certainty about its meaning is almost always misplaced. Even when a prophecy proves true, even when events unfold exactly as predicted, there remains the question of whether those events were inevitable or whether they occurred because the prophecy existed and people acted on it. Did Daenerys burn King's Landing because prophecy demanded it? Or did she burn it because she made certain choices influenced by her belief in her destiny and her role in ancient predictions? Did Jon Snow help defeat the White Walkers because he was the prophesied hero, or simply because he was a good man who made brave choices, and the prophecy merely described what would happen when such a person found themselves in those circumstances? The ambiguity serves a purpose, reminding everyone that free will exists alongside prophecy, that knowing the future does not mean being controlled by it. The future might be seen in visions and dreams, but it is created by choices made in the present. Even prophesied events require people to take actions that bring them about, and those actions are choices, even if they feel inevitable. This is perhaps the most important lesson about prophecy in Westeros, that it is not a cage or a script to be followed, but rather a map of possibilities, showing potential outcomes without dictating which path must be taken to reach them. The danger comes when people forget this, when they treat prophecy as certainty rather than as one form of knowledge among many, to be weighed and considered but not followed blindly. The wise approach to prophecy might be to hold it lightly, to recognize that visions show truths but not the whole truth, to remain open to alternative interpretations, and to the possibility that what seems clear may be misleading. But this kind of wisdom is rare, and it goes against human nature to resist certainty when it is offered, even if that certainty is based on shadows and smoke and cryptic words from ancient texts. As we reach the end of our journey through the realm of prophecy and dream and vision, we find ourselves standing in that same uncomfortable place where all the characters who have experienced prophetic sight eventually stand, knowing something about what will come but not knowing enough to act with confidence, understanding that the future is both fixed and fluid, that we are both free and bound by threads woven long before we were born. The world of ice and fire treats prophecy with a seriousness that our more rational modern world rarely allows. In Westeros and the lands beyond, prophecy is not superstition or wishful thinking, but a real phenomenon, with tangible effects on history and individuals. Dragons returned to the world because prophecy said they would, because certain events aligned to make it possible, because people made choices influenced by dreams and visions. The long night ended because heroes rose to fight against it, perhaps guided by prophecies that had been passed down through generations, perhaps simply making brave choices that happened to align with ancient predictions. What makes prophecy so compelling in this story is that it never provides easy answers. It shows truth, but wraps it in symbol and metaphor. It reveals futures, but not the paths to them. It gives knowledge, but not understanding. This frustrating ambiguity is what makes prophecy feel real, rather than like a plot device, because genuine prophetic sight, if such a thing exists, would surely work this way, showing glimpses and fragments rather than clear roadmaps. The characters who receive prophecies must struggle with what to do with that knowledge, must decide how much to trust it, must balance the pull of destiny against the demands of morality and compassion, and simple human connection. Sometimes they fail spectacularly in this struggle, like Rhaegar, who destroyed himself and his family trying to fulfill what he believed prophecy demanded. Sometimes they succeed in unexpected ways, like Daenerys, who walked into fire trusting in dreams and visions and emerged with dragons. But success and failure are perhaps the wrong framework for understanding prophetic journeys. Prophecy in this world seems less concerned with individual happiness or even survival than with larger patterns, with movements of magic and history that dwarf any single life, no matter how important that person seems in the moment. The children of the forest could see the future, but still faded from the world. The Targaryens had dragon dreams but still lost their throne. Knowing what will come does not grant immunity from suffering or ensure triumph. Perhaps the deepest truth about prophecy is that it connects past, present, and future in ways that make time itself feel less linear, more like a pool where everything exists simultaneously. Bran sees this when he enters the Weirwoods and experiences events from thousands of years ago as vividly as the present. The three-eyed raven lives this, his consciousness stretched across centuries. In such a state, the idea of predicting the future becomes almost meaningless, because the future already exists, just in a part of the pool you have not yet swum to. This perspective is alien to how we normally experience time, with past behind us and future ahead, moving in one direction along a single path. But prophetic sight suggests time works differently than our everyday experience suggests, that cause and effect might flow in multiple directions, that the future might reach back to influence the past, just as the past shapes the future. Bran causing Hodor's condition by reaching back through time demonstrates this perfectly. A closed loop, where there is no clear beginning or end, only the inevitable pattern that must occur for the loop to close. In the end, perhaps prophecy is not really about predicting the future at all, but about understanding the present more deeply. When someone has a vision of what will come, what they are really seeing is the logical consequence of what already exists. The seeds that have already been planted, even if they have not yet sprouted. Prophecy reveals patterns and connections that are invisible to normal sight, but that were always there, always true, waiting to manifest. If this is correct, then prophecy becomes less about fate and more about awareness, less about destiny and more about recognition. The future is not fixed by prophecy, but rather the prophecy recognizes what is already fixed by the nature of the world and the people in it. Daenerys was always going to burn King's Landing, not because prophecy demanded it, but because the seeds of that action were planted in her experiences of betrayal and loss, in her isolation, and her increasing belief that fear was the only way to rule. The prophecy simply saw what was already there, waiting to bloom into terrible fire. This interpretation allows room for free will, while still honoring the reality of prophetic sight. People make choices, but those choices emerge from who they are, what they have experienced, what they believe and desire. If someone can see deep enough into a person's character and circumstances, they might well predict with accuracy what choices that person will make, not because the future is fixed, but because people are who they are and rarely change in fundamental ways. Yet there remains the possibility, slim but real, that prophecy can be subverted, that showing someone a vision of their future might give them the chance to change it by changing themselves. If Cersei had taken Maggie's prophecy, not as a certainty to be feared, but as a warning about the path she was on, she might have chosen differently, might have become less paranoid and more capable of genuine connection. If Rhaegar had understood that prophecies show possibilities rather than absolute certainty, he might have made less destructive choices in pursuit of fulfilling what he believed was his destiny. But changing course requires wisdom that few possess, the ability to hear about your own flaws and failures without becoming defensive, to accept that your current path leads to disaster without falling into despair or denial. It is perhaps one of the hardest things a person can do, to truly see themselves clearly and then choose to become someone different. Most people, when shown a vision of their future, will either deny it entirely or will become so focused on it that they rush toward it blindly, unable to imagine alternatives. The greatest service prophecy might provide is not telling the future, but holding up a mirror that shows who we are and what we are becoming. If we can look into that mirror without flinching, if we can recognize ourselves in visions both glorious and terrible, then we might have a chance to choose which version of ourselves we want to become. But this requires humility and honesty, and willingness to change that prophecy itself cannot grant. So we return to where we began, standing in that torch-lit tent, where blood magic reveals futures wrapped in riddles and smoke. The prophecies of Westeros are real and true and dangerous, giving knowledge without wisdom, foresight without understanding. They have shaped the world in profound ways, driving the Targaryens to survive the doom, inspiring heroes to rise against darkness, corrupting others into paranoia and cruelty. They remind us that there are patterns in history and fate in how events unfold, that some things are meant to happen and will find a way to occur no matter what obstacles stand in the way. But they also remind us that we are not simply puppets dancing to strings pulled by destiny, that our choices matter even if the broad strokes are already written, that how we respond to prophetic knowledge defines us as much as what the prophecy reveals. If you have enjoyed this exploration of the mystical and the fated, of the visions that haunt dreams and shape destinies in the world of ice and fire, I invite you to like this video and subscribe to the channel. There are so many more corners of this magnificent world to explore together, so many more stories to tell beside this fireside. Until next time, may your dreams be clear and your choices wise, and may you face whatever future comes with courage and grace. Good night, dear travelers.